there are sources I've talked to within Alameda who said that this backdoor, or at least this relationship between the firms, have existed since the beginning. It's hard in this market, right, to kind of discern what people's motives are, what their intentions are, and whether or not they're speaking badly about someone because of their own book, as it were. So it's difficult to say. We're going to find out a lot of interesting things in the coming days and weeks and months, and it's going to be, and then years afterwards. So it's difficult to say, but if I were to have a gun held to my head.
No guns here, but go ahead.
Good. I'm safe. My head is safe. I think that it's been just completely mismanaged from the beginning. I think that, there's a possibility of fraud, at least with respect to a misrepresentation to regulators. Let's put intentions aside. They don't really matter, right? Intentions don't really matter. People were hurt and lied to. And so that's where you can possibly run into some issues. And there was misrepresentations. Even going back to the 2019 story that we first reported on FTX's launch, Sam said to us that he would imminently step down as CEO of Alameda. He didn't do that till the end of 2021. So there was nothing imminent about that. He also said that they were doing, in 2021, there were gap audits that showed the financial stability of the business. John Ray, the current CEO, paints a very wildly different story of a lack of financial controls, a lack of basically everything you would expect from a business that's acting quasi as a shadow bank. There was nothing. They were approving, expenses via Slack emojis. And if any other company was doing that, it would just be egregious. Like, we would have maybe picked up on it a bit more. But what they did so masterfully was really throw a bunch of glitter into our eyes, if you think about it, right? With the sponsorship deals, with just the je ne sais quoi that was his bizarre
did they ever send
aesthetic.
Did they ever send you guys balance sheets or anything as like reporters?
We never got any sort of balance sheet from them.
So no balance sheets, but also then what about like GAAP financials or audits or anything like that?
So they told us that they had those, and at the end of 2021, they said they were going to be releasing the GAAP financials for 2022, I think, or rather in 2022 they were going to release 2021.
They never did.
I don't know. Here's the other thing that I've been reflecting on. I don't know if we never got them, but I also think so much was happening post-COVID. And I spoke to Vanity Fair about this. The go-go era of crypto, without the proper controls and self-regulation or outside regulation from regulators, I think allowed the market to kind of get out of control. And, when you have and maybe this was part of their strategy, they were announcing things every week. So as a reporter, let's say you were on the FTX beat, it's very hard to sort of sit back and think, okay, what is weird here? We'd ask the questions, but to go deeper, because they were constantly putting out information. We're opening up an office in Chicago. We have the Miami Heat deal. We're moving to Bahamas now. We're working with the Bahamian government on DARE. And they inundated the market with all this information. And in hindsight, it's reasonable to think that there was a strategic element there to distract while they fixed or did something else. But these are some of the things I've been reflecting on, and there a lot of strange stuff, right? Even thinking about the effect of altruism. That is probably the one thing I would kick myself about is, going to Crypto Bahamas and seeing where they lived, right?
Did you go to the apartment?
Not his apartment, but I sort of, did a tour de Nassau, as it were. And this is luxury. This isn't, they weren't living like Talmudic monks, right? This is very antithetical to the sort of, I drive a Corolla mantra that was put out there. And I wish that I kind of picked up on that a little bit more. And what I thought at the time was almost, okay, like, people make a lot of money in crypto. Let's say they're all living together. It makes sense that they would go all in or sort of split the costs, right? And, if it's a $10 million house and 10 people live in it, it's $1 million house. $1 million house doesn't raise eyebrows, especially in this market, right? So that's kind of how I thought about it. But in hindsight, definitely is a bit peculiar given the sort of effective altruism and humility that underpinned a lot of the marketing.
Do you think he's going to get in trouble? Or do you think that it'll be like a whoops, made a mistake?
Well, he's definitely painting the story as a whoops, I made a mistake. That's the toughest question, right? I mean, because there's a very fine line between mismanagement, being incapable of properly running a company, and fraud, right? I believe that, even in 2008, there was a lot of bad management. No one went to jail, right? Except for that one guy who misappropriated Goldman Sachs's proprietary trading algorithms data or whatever it was. And then you have Elizabeth Holmes, who is going to jail for 11 years. So I think on both sides, or rather in both instances, you would say people did things bad, but it doesn't necessarily translate into that sort of corporal punishment necessarily. Does he get in trouble generally, like in a very deep sense? Yeah, I think he's in pretty big trouble.
Yeah. Well, he's in trouble, but I mean, I guess in the most extreme jail time, right? Barred from the financial industry. Like, you can kind of go down the line. There's a bunch of punishments that historically have been levied.
Against. John Corzine didn't spend a day in jail for MF Global, and they're similar. Again, whereas Elizabeth Holmes, right? Basically lied to her investors, and she's spending quite a bit of time in jail. Yeah. And lied to regulators, I believe.
Yeah. What about the relationship between the Bahamas and the United States? Because I would have thought pre this event, the United States and the Bahamas are friendly. If something happens that involves a U.S. citizen or U.S. customers or whatever, the Bahamas basically would say, hey, you guys are the United States, do your thing. But I saw a letter that was sent from the Bahamian security regulators. They were like, this is a Bahamian incident. You don't have jurisdiction here, basically, is what they were saying. And that surprised me. Should I have been surprised? Maybe am I not educated and didn't understand that that's the position they would take? Or what did you think about that?
I wasn't surprised because the way that these bankruptcy proceedings work, oftentimes you have disputes between jurisdictions, especially ones that are playing a shell game, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if you see other jurisdictions try to sort of step up to the plate and carve out their part of the pie.